Welcome to Grand Tiger Gaming, where I cover Gran Turismo and other driving games. If you saw my last video, I walked through every UI element in the race HUD, though inevitably, I missed some details that are more minor, but they're actually pretty important. So if you want a more holistic walkthrough, be sure to watch part 1, which I'll leave a link to in the description. For this one, we'll be walking through some more minor but important details, so stay tuned. Alright, so just a quick outline of what we're going to be discussing in this guide. We'll be discussing the wind direction and speed, the tire wetness gauge, penalty info, the turbo gauge and boost, the DRS system, low fuel warning, the pit menu, and just a quick announcement that for part 3, we'll be doing a more in-depth walkthrough of the multifunction display. I covered it a little bit in my first video, but I want to go a little bit more in depth and talk about some strategies in my next video, so you might want to subscribe and stay tuned to catch that one. So let's get started with the wind direction and speed. So in the top right under the mini map, you will have the wind direction and the wind speed. I believe this is new to Gran Turismo 7, but in any case, I have noticed that at lower wind speeds, it's mostly negligible, but at higher wind speeds like 15 and above, I definitely feel like it drastically starts to push on the car. You can see the car is less responsive when driving or turning against the wind direction. Next we have the tire wetness gauge. This one is also very important. So in the bottom left of the screen next to the tires, we have the tire wetness gauge. As the tires get more wet, you will see them fill with a blue line. I have more notes about this coming up in the next video that I talked about, but in short, if the wetness is lower, you can get away with most tires, but when that wetness gauge gets, closer to halfway or above halfway, you definitely want to pit and switch to either the heavy wet or the intermediate tires. In general, the heavy wets are what I prefer, but there are some cases where you might want to use intermediate, like in mixed conditions. Next, we have the penalty info. If you get a penalty, you will get an indication how many seconds will be applied to your penalty. You will also get a text field letting you know when the penalty line is coming up. I do wish the penalty info was a little bit less obtrusive. In certain views and on steep inclines and declines on certain tracks, it could tend to block the road a bit, which is a little bit annoying, but not a big deal. Next, we have the boost pressure gauge. If your car has a turbo installed, you will see the boost pressure gauge spooling up and down. I don't know if there's any way to fine tune the boost pressure, but if you guys know, please let me know in the comments below and help us all out. Next, we have the DRS. The DRS stands for the drag reduction system. This essentially adjusts the spoiler if a car has DRS installed. On a straight line, you can alter the angle or presence of the spoiler wing to allow more air through. So you'll end up having less downforce while it's open, but you'll also be able to get to your top speed faster. I'm not sure if there's a default button mapping for this, but if not, you can go into the controller or the wheel settings and map this to whatever button works best for you. Alright, so next we have the low fuel warning. If you're in a race that uses fuel, when you're low on fuel, you'll start to get warnings to pit and refuel. It can be helpful because there are times where you're hyper focused on the race and you lose sight of how much fuel you're using. So again, in some of my upcoming guides, I'll go over a little bit more in depth with fuel strategy and fuel mapping. But yeah, that's another UI element that comes up when you're running low on fuel. All right, so next we have the pit menu UI. So what the pit menu UI allows you to do is when you pit, you can change your tires and you can also refuel or stop your refueling process. Pretty simple overall, but again, the strategies in the pit can be very important depending on the race and the weather conditions. Alright guys, so that's it for this video. I just wanted to cover some of the things I missed in part 1. And then in part 3 coming up, I'll be doing a more in-depth look at the MFD or multifunction display and some racing strategies on how to use it dynamically while you're in the middle of a race. So subscribe to catch that. Thank you guys all for watching and your subs. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. And like I said, I have a lot more guides on the way. I love doing this. I love addressing your comments below. And yeah, thanks for watching. Gran Tiger out.